My name is Victor. I'm 36 years old, and I live in a small but bustling town in Oregon. Back then, everyone thought Amelia and I were the perfect couple. Even I believed it. I still remember the first time I saw her at that coffee shop near the courthouse. She had a way of making everyone in the room feel like they mattered, like they were the only one she wanted to see. That's how she made me feel for years. Our early years were filled with little surprises, Amelia's homemade chocolate chip cookies waiting for me after a long day at the site, spontaneous road trips to the coast, and how she always remembered the tiniest things. Like that dessert I raved about at my cousin's wedding, the one with the caramel drizzle. She made it for me on our one-year anniversary. It was easy to love her. The way she'd slip her hand into mine during the most mundane moments, like waiting in line at the grocery store or just walking to the mailbox. The way she'd rest her head on my shoulder on those quiet Sunday mornings. It all felt so right. We settled into a rhythm, a life of small joys and warm routines. She'd pack me lunch with little notes tucked inside, thinking of you, or let's make spaghetti tonight. I'd fix the squeaky hinges on the cabinets she never noticed but always appreciated. That was just how we worked. We balanced each other. Our friends used to joke that we were the kind of couple you'd see in a movie, always in sync, always happy. My buddies at work, even my mom, said I was lucky to have someone like Amelia. And I believed them. Hell, I believed it more than anyone. We had this image of a perfect life, and for a while, it felt real. I'd look at her across the dinner table, and I'd see the life we built, the quiet, dependable love, the kind you read about. But now, thinking back, I wonder if that love was real, or if it was just a story I wanted so badly to believe in. Because when I look at those early days, I realize the cracks were already there, too small to see, too easy to ignore. But they were there. I didn't see them because I didn't want to. Because every time I caught her looking at me with that soft smile, I told myself we were solid. Every time she'd tuck herself under my arm and say, "I love how safe I feel with you," I believed it. I believed it all. I remember our first road trip to the Oregon coast. She sang along to every song, even the ones she didn't know the words to. We stopped at a little seafood shack by the water, and she made a big show of feeding me clam chowder straight from the cup. We got lost on the way back, and instead of panicking, she laughed so hard she had to pull over on the shoulder just to catch her breath. She made everything feel light, effortless. When we got back home, she hung up a photo of us standing by the water, her arms around my waist. It was framed on the living room wall for years, a testament to what we thought we were building. Back then, I didn't know that love could be both real and an illusion. That you could love someone with everything you had and still miss the truth. That's the story I'm telling now. The story of how I learned that even the most perfect picture can hide cracks too deep to see. For a long time, I believed in us. And maybe that was the biggest illusion of all. A couple of years into our marriage, things started to feel different. It was so subtle at first, I almost didn't notice it. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, going over invoices from the construction site, and Amelia would be there, swirling her coffee, asking questions. "So, how's the bonus situation this year?" she'd ask, like she was just making conversation. "Decent, I'd say, not thinking much of it. They're talking about giving everyone a little extra for the interstate project." She'd nod, a soft smile on her face. "That's great. You work so hard. You deserve it." Then, a few days later, she'd bring it up again. "I was just thinking," she'd say as she folded laundry, "if we put some of that bonus money away, we could maybe start planning for retirement early. Or even get into real estate, you know? Just a thought." At first, it felt sweet. Like she was dreaming about our future. We'd always talked about retiring somewhere warm, maybe Arizona or Florida. But the questions kept coming. And they got more specific. "What about that stock plan your company offers? Do you still have those shares from before we got married?" she'd ask one evening as we sat on the couch, half watching a cooking show. I shifted in my seat, a little surprised. "Yeah, I guess I do. I don't really touch them, though." She didn't push it that night, just let it hang in the air. But a few days later, she circled back. "You know, I've been reading about how important it is to keep track of all those assets. Like your old construction bonuses, what if they're just sitting there gathering dust? Shouldn't we be a little smarter about it?" It wasn't just the questions, it was the way she asked them. Calm, deliberate, like she'd practiced the words in her head. Like she was rehearsing. I wanted to believe she was just looking out for us. That she was the same woman who used to bake me pies for no reason, who used to sing to the radio in the shower. But in the back of my mind, a little alarm bell started to ring. I'd catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking. Her lips pursed in that calculating way she got when she was balancing the checkbook. I told myself it was normal. Couples talk about money all the time, right? But something about it didn't feel like talking. It felt like an audit. I tried to brush it off. I'd tell myself, she's just being responsible. She's always been good with money. But the questions got more frequent and more pointed. One night, we were having dinner, lasagna, the kind she used to make just for me on those long winter nights. She pushed her plate aside and looked at me over the candlelight. Victor, she said softly, you've never told me about that property you bought before we got married. The little rental you used to talk about. Do you still own it? I blinked. Yeah, I do. Why? She leaned back, her eyes never leaving mine. I just think we should know everything we have, so we can make the best choices for our future. The way she said it, it wasn't a suggestion. It was a directive. And that was the night I realized these weren't just harmless questions. I tried to play it cool. I told her I'd look into it, that I'd gather up the paperwork and we'd sit down and figure it out together. But inside, I was already unsettled. Because it wasn't like Amelia. Or maybe it was. Maybe I just hadn't seen it before. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek like nothing had happened. She packed my lunch with one of those sweet notes she used to write, "Have a great day, love you." And for a second, I almost let myself believe it was all normal. Just a wife caring about our future. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was measuring me, weighing her options. And for the first time since I'd met her, I didn't feel safe in our kitchen with her smile and her questions. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. I still wanted to believe in us, in the life we had built. But as I walked out the door that morning, the note still in my hand, I realized something had shifted. I just didn't know how much yet. I started noticing the changes in her patterns before I even realized what they meant. Amelia was always good with details. She never forgot a birthday, never let a bill slip through the cracks. But now, those details seemed to be about me. It started with the bank app. One night, I was up late in the living room, trying to catch up on some work. I glanced over at her on the couch, her phone screen lighting up her face. She was frowning, scrolling slowly. I couldn't see what she was looking at, but she didn't notice me watching her. A few minutes later, she set her phone down and looked up, catching my eye. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, her smile tight. "I was just checking our balances. You know, making sure everything's in order." She said it so smoothly I almost believed her. Almost. After that, I started seeing her check our joint account balance a couple times a day. I'd walk into the room, and she'd flick the screen away like it was nothing. Just checking on the bills, she'd say, all light and breezy. But something about the way her finger hovered over the screen told me it wasn't just about the bills. She started taking calls in private too. Quick, whispered conversations behind the closed door of our bedroom. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd shrug. "Oh, just my mom. Her work stuff. Nothing important." But her tone was flat, rehearsed. Like she'd already decided what I needed to hear. She started asking me about my schedule more than usual. "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" she'd ask over her morning coffee. "How late do you think you'll be tonight?" Her voice was always light, almost playful, but I could feel the weight behind it. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just curious, I told myself. Maybe she was planning a surprise. Amelia loved surprises. But the more I watched her, the more it felt like she was planning something else. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore it, either. So I started tracking her, the way I'd track the progress of a project at work. I'd keep mental notes, when she was on the phone, when she was checking the accounts, when she suddenly needed to run an errand that took an hour longer than it should have. I even started writing it down, old school style, in a little notepad I kept in my truck. The data didn't lie. I compared the dates she was most secretive to the times money moved around in our accounts. She'd check the balances in the morning, then in the afternoon, and again at night, like she was waiting for something to drop. She'd ask me about work right before those checks, every time. I knew it in my gut, something was wrong. And it wasn't just my paranoia. I'd managed budgets for multi-million-dollar projects. I knew how to track spending and patterns. And Amelia? She was following one. One night, she was in the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone. I could only catch bits and pieces. Her voice soft, almost too careful. "Yes, no, I'll handle it, he won't know." The words made my skin crawl. I didn't confront her. I didn't want to tip my hand, not yet. Instead, I started cross-referencing everything. Her calls, her new interest in my schedule, the balances she kept refreshing. It wasn't adding up to anything good. I'd catch her in little lies, too. She'd say she was out shopping for groceries, but come back with nothing. Or say she was meeting a friend for lunch, but wouldn't mention which friend. Each time, her story was just a little too polished. At work, I'd find my mind wandering, thinking about her voice on those hushed phone calls. I'd stare at the spreadsheets in front of me, numbers swimming, and think about how she used to be the one person I trusted without a second thought. Now, I wasn't sure I could trust her at all. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the woman who used to remember every little thing I loved, my favorite pie, the way I liked my coffee, was the same woman who was now moving behind my back. But every time I looked at the numbers, the patterns, the way she moved around me like a shadow, I knew it was true. She was preparing for something. And whatever it was, it didn't have a place for me. By the time I knew for sure that something was off, it was too late to stop the feeling of dread that had settled into my chest. But I didn't confront Amelia. Not yet. I couldn't. There was still a part of me that wanted to believe this was all in my head, that she was just stressed, or bored, or, I don't know. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did her eyes when she looked at me. So I did what I always did when things got complicated. I planned. Quietly, methodically. I started by opening a separate account, one she didn't know about, one tied only to my name. I moved my personal savings there, the money I'd saved before we got married. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me some breathing room if things went south. Next, I went through the house with a camera on my phone, taking pictures of every major thing we owned together. The furniture, the appliances, even the paintings on the walls that Amelia picked out at some overpriced art fair. I wanted to make sure I had a record, something I could show if I had to. At night, I'd lie awake, listening to her breathing beside me. She still slept like nothing was wrong, her hair fanned out on the pillow, her hands sometimes brushing against mine. I'd watch her in the soft glow of the streetlight outside our window and wonder how long she'd been planning this. Because that's what it felt like, a plan. And I knew how plans worked. I'd spent years drafting blueprints and managing timelines. This was no different. Except this time, the blueprint was for my own life. During the day, I kept things normal. I still kissed her goodbye in the morning, still listened when she told me about her day, still said, "I love you," when she said it first. But inside, I was already pulling back, gathering my pieces. I didn't tell anyone what was going on. Not my buddy from work, not my mom when she called to ask how we were doing. I just said everything was fine, because if I said the words out loud, if I admitted it, it would make it real. The tipping point came when Amelia started talking about selling some of the things we owned. She'd mention it casually, like it was no big deal. "Maybe we should think about getting rid of that old sofa in the den," she'd say one night as she folded laundry. "It's kind of dated, don't you think?" Or, "We never really used those patio chairs. Maybe we could sell them, put the money towards something else." Something else. The way she said it made my stomach turn. I didn't argue. I just nodded and made a mental note. I started keeping track of every conversation about money, every mention of assets or investments. I wrote it all down in that little notepad I kept in my truck, the one that was starting to feel more like a lifeline than a record. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. Amelia would still kiss me goodnight, still laugh at my dumb jokes. But her eyes were different. There was a coldness there, a distance I'd never seen before. And every time I caught it, I felt a little more of the foundation we'd built crack beneath my feet. I didn't know how this would end. I just knew I had to be ready. So I kept my head down. I played the part of the devoted husband. But every day, I was pulling away, inch by inch, dollar by dollar. I wasn't going to let her blindside me. Not without a fight. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew how to protect what was mine. And for the first time in our marriage, I stopped trusting the picture she painted for us. I stopped believing in the perfect little world we'd built together. Because if there was one thing I learned from years of working on job sites, it was this: when the foundation starts to crack, you don't just hope it'll fix itself. You brace for the collapse. It was a Wednesday morning, just like any other. I was sitting at the kitchen table, half listening to the radio and half thinking about the project I had to get to that afternoon. Amelia walked in, her face calm, almost serene. She had a plain white envelope in her hand. "Morning," she said, her voice light. "I need to talk to you." I looked up from my coffee. "What's up?" She didn't sit down. Instead, she walked over and placed the envelope on the table in front of me. "It's time," she said. I frowned, reaching for it. My fingers brushed the edge of the paper, and for a second, I thought maybe it was something simple, some bill she wanted me to look at, maybe a letter from the bank. But when I opened it, I saw the first word in bold: petition for dissolution of marriage. I looked up at her, my throat tight. "You're filing for divorce?" My voice was flat, calm. Too calm. She nodded, her face unreadable. "I already did. It's filed." I sat back in my chair, feeling the world tilt a little around me. "Just like that?" I asked. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything. She just crossed her arms over her chest and stared at me. "I think it's best," she said finally. "For both of us." There was no emotion in her voice, no flicker of regret. Just cold, practiced detachment. I set the papers down carefully, folding my hands in my lap. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. "So that's it," I said softly. She shrugged, her lips pulling into a tight line. "People grow apart, Victor. It happens. We're just at different places now." It wasn't even an apology, just a statement of fact, like she was talking about the weather. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd seen enough already to know this was coming, even if I hadn't wanted to admit it. "Okay," I said finally. Just that one word. She blinked. I could see the faintest crack in her expression, like she hadn't expected me to take it so well. "Okay," she repeated. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. I figured this was coming. "So, okay." She shifted her weight, her fingers tapping against her arm. I thought you'd. I don't know. I thought you'd at least have something to say. I let out a breath and leaned back in my chair. What's there to say? You've already made your choice. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip. My hands didn't shake. Amelia stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face. She didn't find what she was looking for, I guess, because her shoulders tensed and her mouth tightened. I'm sorry you feel that way. I almost laughed at that. Sorry I feel that way? It was like she wanted me to be the one who was wrong here, to be the one who needed to explain himself. But I didn't. I wouldn't. Instead, I set my cup down, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, and stood up. You do what you have to do, Amelia, I said quietly. I'll be fine. For a moment, she looked almost thrown, like this wasn't how it was supposed to go, like she expected me to beg, or rage, or plead for her to stay. But I didn't, because I knew better now. She cleared her throat, her face stiff. I'll be staying with my sister for a while, she said. Until things settle. I nodded. Fine. Take whatever you need. She hesitated, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing as she packed whatever she thought was hers. I stood there for a moment, staring at the divorce papers on the table. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. Because this time, I wasn't the one caught off guard. I'd seen the signs, the cracks in the foundation, and I was ready. When she came back down with her suitcase, I didn't say a word. I didn't offer to help. I just stepped aside and let her walk out. She paused at the door, glancing back at me one last time. There was something in her eyes then, something like confusion, or maybe regret. But I didn't care. I just nodded. Good luck, I said. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She turned and walked out the door, and I let her go. As the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled slowly. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't with panic or fear. It was relief, because I wasn't the one left scrambling this time. She thought she could control the story, but she didn't know that I'd already written my own ending. 2 weeks after she handed me the papers, Amelia was gone, like she'd never been here at all. I guess that's how she wanted it. Clean. No messy explanations. No ties left behind. At first, it felt almost peaceful. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. No more questions about where I was going. No more small talk that felt like an interview. Just me and the echo of everything we used to be. But that peace didn't last long. A couple days after she left, my phone started buzzing. Old friends, co-workers, even some of her family members. Have you heard from Amelia? They'd ask. She's not answering her phone. Did you too? They didn't say the word, but I could hear it in their voices. I kept my answers simple. She's fine, I'd say. We're done. I didn't owe them anything more. But the more they called, the more I realized something was off. It wasn't just me she'd disappeared from, she'd cut off everyone. No social media. No job updates. Even her best friend, Lauren, called me in tears one night, saying she'd been blocked on everything. I checked our joint accounts one morning, just out of habit. The money was still there. But her personal account? Zero. Wiped clean. Like she'd swept everything into a bag and walked away. I thought about calling her. Just to ask why. Just to hear her voice one more time. But I stopped myself. I knew better now. She wasn't running from me. She was running from something else. Something I'd never seen in her eyes until the end. Fear. Desperation. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a divorce. This was an escape plan. The next week, I started hearing from people who didn't know about the split yet. Old friends of hers, co-workers from the interior design firm. Hey, is Amelia around? She didn't show up to work. Or, she said she was going on a trip, but no one's heard from her since. It was like she dropped off the face of the earth. One afternoon, I found a note on the fridge in her handwriting. Just one line. Don't look for me. No explanation. No apology. Just that. I read it a couple times, trying to figure out what it meant. But deep down, I already knew. She wasn't coming back. And whatever she'd been planning, it was bigger than just leaving me. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I'd already let her go. But late at night, when the house was too quiet, I'd find myself staring at that note, wondering what she was running from, wondering if I'd ever really known her at all. One day, out of nowhere, I got a call from an old coworker of hers. Victor, I don't know how to say this, but Amelia quit. No notice, no forwarding address. She didn't even pick up her last paycheck. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. Thanks for letting me know, I said. My voice was calm, but inside, I felt something break. Because that was it, wasn't it? She wasn't just gone from my life, she was gone from everyone's. I didn't try to chase her. I didn't want to. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't my story anymore. I started focusing on work. I took on bigger projects, put in longer hours. Anything to keep my mind busy. And at night, I'd come home to the silence of an empty house, and I'd tell myself this was freedom. But some nights, I couldn't help wondering what she was really running from, or what she thought she'd find out there in whatever new life she was building. Because one thing was clear, this wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, one I was never supposed to see coming. It had been a few months since she disappeared. I'd settled back into my life, more or less. Work was good, the house was quiet, and there was something comforting about the routine. I'd even started seeing someone new, Sophie, a school counselor I met at a friend's barbecue. She was sweet, grounded, the kind of person who didn't ask for more than she gave. One night, Sophie's car was in the driveway. We cooked dinner together, pasta, a bottle of cheap red wine, and we were watching a movie when the knock came. It was loud, urgent, like whoever was on the other side wasn't going to wait. Sophie looked at me, her brow furrowed. Expecting someone? I shook my head and stood up, my heart already beating faster. When I opened the door, she was standing there. Amelia. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild. She looked nothing like the calm, careful woman I'd been married to. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. Victor, she said, her voice sharp, almost shaking. We need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, feeling the cold night air on my skin. Amelia, I said quietly. What are you doing here? She didn't answer right away. She looked past me, her eyes narrowing when she saw Sophie's car in the driveway. Who's here? She asked. None of your business, I said. I kept my voice calm, steady. Her eyes flicked back to mine, and for a second, I saw something almost desperate there. You think you can just move on? She said, her voice rising. You think you can just replace me, like I was nothing? I took a slow breath. You left, Amelia. You disappeared. You made your choice. She took a step forward, her face twisted. I want back the things I gave you, she said. The watch I bought you for your birthday. The set of knives we picked out together. I want it all back. I blinked. You're serious? I asked, my voice flat. She nodded, her hands balled into fists at her sides. You owe me, she said. You owe me those things. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. You really think that's what this is about? I said quietly. A watch? A set of knives. She didn't answer. She was too busy staring at Sophie's car, her eyes dark with something I didn't recognize. She's here, she said suddenly. That's her car, isn't it? I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Amelia's face crumpled. You're disgusting, she spat. You're a liar. You're a traitor. Before I could respond, Sophie stepped into the doorway behind me. Victor, she said softly. Is everything okay? Amelia's eyes went wide. You brought her here? She snapped. You let her into our house? I turned and met Sophie's gaze. It's fine, I said. I'll take care of it. Sophie looked at me, her eyes full of quiet strength, and nodded. She didn't say anything more. She just stepped back, giving me space. I turned back to Amelia. I'm going to ask you one time to leave, I said. My voice was calm, measured. You don't live here anymore. You don't get to come back and demand things from me. For a second, I thought she'd argue. But then her face twisted into something bitter and broken. You think you've won, she said, her voice low. But you haven't. You'll always be mine, Victor. No matter what. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just stepped back and closed the door in her face. I could hear her outside, yelling, accusing me of betrayal, of cruelty, of moving on too fast. But I didn't open the door again. I didn't let her back in. When I turned around, Sophie was standing in the hallway, her arms folded over her chest. Are you okay? She asked softly. I nodded. Yeah, I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart was still pounding. I'm okay. She walked over and rested her hand on my arm. You don't have to deal with this alone, she said. I looked at her and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, relief. I know, I said. Thank you. That night, as I lay in bed with Sophie beside me, I thought about Amelia, about the woman who used to make me feel safe, and the stranger who had shown up on my doorstep. And I realized that sometimes, the person you loved the most could become the person you feared the most. I'd shut the door on her that night, and I knew I'd keep it shut, no matter how many times she came back. About a week after Amelia showed up at my doorstep, I got a call late at night. I was half asleep when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered it anyway. Victor, a man's voice said, unsure, quiet. It's James, Amelia's brother. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. James, I said slowly. What's going on? He let out a shaky breath. I know it's late, he said quickly, but I didn't know who else to call. I think she's in trouble. I leaned back against the headboard, my mind already racing. What kind of trouble? He hesitated. She's been different. Even for her. She's not working. She's staying with some friend I've never met. She's been calling me for money, big amounts, like she's desperate. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to his voice, the way it cracked on the word desperate. I know you guys are done, James said, almost apologetic. But I thought you should know. She mentioned you. She said you owed her. I let out a breath. I don't owe her anything, I said quietly. He sighed. I know. I know she can be manipulative. But she's my sister. I can't just let her sink, you know? I understood that. I really did. But I wasn't going to let Amelia pull me back into her mess. Not now. Not ever. James, I said slowly, do you know what she's been doing? She's been liquidating everything she owns. She disappeared for weeks. She's cut off everyone who ever cared about her. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was soft, almost defeated. I think she's running from something, he said. She's not just drifting. It's like she's trying to get away from something big. Something she won't tell me. My chest tightened. Did she tell you why? James's voice faltered. She said she needed to start over. That's all. She's been talking about selling off family stuff, about liquidating everything she can get her hands on. She asked me for money. A lot of money. I closed my eyes. How much? 20 grand, he said. She said it was for, I don't know. She wouldn't say. Just kept saying she needed it to get free. I almost laughed at that. She's been planning this for a long time, I said. You know that, right? Yeah, he said, his voice small. I guess I wanted to believe she was better than this. I sat there, the phone cold against my ear, listening to the silence between us. And in that silence, I realized something. James was just as lost as I'd been. He wanted to save her, to fix her. But he couldn't. She told me you'd help, James said suddenly. She said you'd want to make things right. That you'd owe it to her, after everything. I let out a bitter laugh. James, she's lying to you, I said. She's been lying to all of us. He was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said finally. I think I always knew. But it's hard, you know? She's my sister. I get it, I said. I really do. But you can't let her drag you down. You have to protect yourself. He let out a breath, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Yeah, you're right. Another pause. I'm sorry to bother you, Victor. I didn't know who else to talk to. It's okay, I said softly. Take care of yourself, James. You too, he said. And then he hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Amelia's brother had confirmed what I'd suspected all along. She wasn't just lost. She was running. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one who was done trying to save her. A few weeks after James's call, Sophie suggested I meet with Amelia one last time. For closure, she said gently. So you can stop wondering. I wasn't sure it was a good idea, but a part of me still wanted answers, some final piece of the puzzle. So I agreed. We met at a busy cafe on the edge of town, a place where no one would care if voices were raised or tears were shed. I got there first and sat at a small table near the window. My coffee was already cold by the time she walked in. Amelia looked different, paler, thinner, her hair tied back in a messy knot. She wore a loose sweater that hung off her shoulders. She looked tired, but there was still something steely in her eyes. She sat down across from me and didn't bother with small talk. I owe you the truth, she said quietly. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. I nodded, waiting. She took a breath. I met someone at a design conference in Napa last year, she began, her eyes darting to the window and back. It was stupid. It was supposed to be nothing, a fling, a chance to feel alive again. But it turned into something else. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. I thought I loved him, she said, her fingers twisting around the handle of her coffee cup. He was older, charming. He talked about dreams, about starting a life together. A vineyard, he said. He had this idea about buying land, making wine. He made it sound so perfect. A vineyard. I almost laughed, but I didn't. So you left everything behind for a vineyard? I asked softly. She nodded, her face flushed. I used the settlement money from our divorce. Every penny. I thought if I invested it in something real, something that was ours, it would all work out. And I asked, even though I already knew. She swallowed hard. It didn't. The vineyard was a pipe dream. He had no idea what he was doing. We lost everything in 6 months. I watched her, my heart pounding in my chest. So what now? I said, my voice calm. What do you want from me, Amelia? She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the panic in her eyes. I'm pregnant, she whispered. He left me. And now, I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes for a moment, let the weight of her words settle in my chest. When I opened them, she was staring at me, her eyes pleading. I need your help, Victor, she said. Please. I shook my head slowly. No, I said quietly. I'm done helping you. You made your choice. She blinked, like she didn't understand. But I'm alone, she said, her voice breaking. I have nothing, and I have nothing left to give you, I said. My voice was steady, calm, like I'd practiced these words in my head 100 times. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at me. Then she let out a breath, a shaky, almost defeated sigh. You really don't care anymore, do you? I did, I said. For a long time. But I can't anymore. She looked down at the table, her shoulders slumping. I thought you'd always be there for me. I let out a small, humorless laugh. So did I said. But I guess we were both wrong. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, stood up, and walked out of the cafe. I watched her go, feeling lighter than I had in months. She had finally told me the truth, and I'd finally told her no. When I got home that night, Sophie was waiting for me. She didn't ask questions. She just wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I'd spent years trying to save Amelia, trying to make sense of her choices. But sitting in that cafe, I realized she wasn't mine to save. She never was. 2 nights after that meeting at the cafe, I was jolted awake by a loud pounding at the door. It was almost midnight. I sat up in bed, my heart already racing. Sophie stirred beside me, blinking in the darkness. "Who is it?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I just pulled on a shirt and went to the door, my mind already spinning. I had a feeling I knew who it was. When I opened the door, Amelia was standing there, wild-eyed and disheveled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, her hair tangled, her clothes wrinkled. She was shaking. "You need to let me in," she said, her voice hoarse. I didn't move. "No," I said, my voice calm. "This isn't your home anymore." She let out a bitter laugh. "You think you can just shut me out? After everything we've been through?" I felt my jaw tighten. "You ended this, Amelia. You made your choices. You don't get to show up here like nothing happened." She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You owe me," she said, her voice rising. "You owe me because you're the one who turned your back on me." I didn't flinch. "No," I said quietly. "I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away." She was breathing hard now, her hands clenching at her sides. "You're with her," she spat, nodding toward the car in the driveway. "You're playing house with some other woman while I'm out here with nothing." I didn't even bother to deny it. "I'm building something real with Sophie," I said evenly. "Something you never understood." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "You think she's better than me?" she demanded. "You think she can replace me?" "I don't want to replace you," I said calmly. "I want to forget you." Her face twisted in fury. "You'll regret this, Victor," she hissed. "You'll regret turning your back on me." "I don't think so," I said. I took a step back and started to close the door. "Goodbye, Amelia." She lunged forward, shoving the door open again. "I'm not done," she yelled. "You can't just erase me." I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone and started dialing. When she saw what I was doing, she froze. "You're calling the cops on me," she said, her voice shaking. "You're really going to do that?" I met her gaze steadily. "If you don't leave right now." "Yes," I said. "I'm done with your games." For a second, she looked like she might argue. But then she stepped back, her shoulders slumping. "You're nothing," she said, her voice low and bitter. "You're nothing without me." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. She turned and stormed off into the night, her footsteps echoing on the pavement. I watched her go, my hand still gripping my phone. When I was sure she was gone, I shut the door and locked it behind me. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding, and then I took a deep breath. I texted Sophie, who had stayed in the bedroom. "She's gone," I wrote. "I'm okay." A few seconds later, she came out, her hair messy, her eyes soft with worry. She held up a box of donuts she'd bought earlier that day, a small, sweet peace offering. "You want one?" she asked. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and managed a small smile. "Yeah," I said. "I think I do." We sat at the kitchen table, the box of donuts between us, the quiet of the house settling around us. I felt the weight of the past few months start to lift, piece by piece. Because I knew then that I'd finally closed the door on Amelia for good. I wasn't going to let her back in. I wasn't going to let her pull me under. I was done. And as I sat there with Sophie eating a donut at midnight, I realized that was enough. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was looking forward.